Yes, honey.
Ava, shh. You got to be quiet. You need to be quiet, okay?
Oh, I just got a notification that we're live. I never get notifications that we're live. That's weird.
I probably signed up for it.
Well, or something reset on my account.
Mm-hmm. You have to hit the little bell. Ooh.
I'm always hitting the bell.
Yeah.
Oh, there we are. Okay, so it's Friday Live, and it's going to be an interesting one. We have both kids home today for spring break.
One's sick.
One is sick, and she's over here in the shop, and the other one is watching TV. So anything goes. At some point, you just may... We have to be quiet. At some point, you just may see Nicole take off, and it will just be me and the chat room and doing my best to do the show. So, happy Friday.
Hey, it's live.
Yeah, this is the real deal, and we're not going to cancel the show because that would be terrible. We never cancel the show. So because we have a fixed number of topics now, I only take 3 topics from the Patreon questions, I can kind of give you an idea of what's coming. I think that'll be a nice change. So today's topics, we're going to be talking about selecting the right joinery, upgrading your jointer, or buying a bandsaw. Kind of an interesting choice. And then chamfering proud joinery.
Ooh,
and I even did a little demo.
I like this format where you say what we're going to talk about.
I think it's much more useful.
Yeah.
It's much more contained. And then the wild card is basically anything that comes from the chat, and we'll see what happens with that.
So I'll be pulling those from the YouTube chat, and I can guarantee you I will be leaving soon.
Yeah, at some point. Yeah, she's not chilling out, she's just playing. So,
yeah.
Okay, we have some news from the Wood Whisperer store, AKA from TWW Mom. She got very upset last week because we forgot to mention one of her sales.
Oh no.
She was having. So she says, we are running our March Madness sale till the 2nd of April. Save 20% to 65% on select items. Many of the items, such as the TWW coffee mug or the hot and cold tumbler, will no longer be carried after this point. So once they're gone, they're gone. The sale is subject to inventory that we happen to have on hand. I also want to mention, where's my apron? I got to show it. Leather aprons. You guys remember that's the Guild aprons. Those are available, and they are absolutely stunning from Calavera Tool, customized with pockets the way that I like them. All right, so this beautiful thing here can be yours. Yes. They're in stock, ready to go. We have the regular aprons, which are, that's the size I got. And just for reference, the regular size was actually a little bit big for me.
Oh,
so I'm like on the tightest settings on these things. And then we have the big and tall sizes, which are available as well. Those are a little bit more limited in stock. So all this stuff is going on at twwstore.com. That's where you find all the action. We've got a sad little girl over there.
Oh my God, as he's talking, she's like...
Because she's being ignored. Oh, she's going back in the house. This can't be good. Okay, so I'm going to get to my pre-selected questions. If you need to go, just go.
I will, okay.
One of those days, guys.
It's been one of those weeks for me.
It's been one of those weeks. Okay, so patreon.com/woodwhisperer is where you can find out more.
Have you been reading the names from the people that have been doing Patreon?
Sure.
No.
Of course I have.
You've been playing your video game.
Well, look, Marvel Strike Force just came out, and it's been dominating my morning. And look, I'm doing my best to get along here, but sometimes a game just catches your attention.
Real quick question from JB Alexander. You want to know if we have an affiliate link for the background drops that you were showing off on Instagram.
I'll have to find it.
Didn't you get that from?
I got them from Amazon, I believe.
Oh,
or at least some of the components were on Amazon. Here's what you do. Go to the Wood Whisperer. We have a video for that. I'm not wearing my t-shirt.
No, you're not.
Just search on our website, Photographing Your Work. And we did a live segment actually on it, and I took a piece of that out to show my backdrop system. And I'm almost positive I put links. It would be silly if I didn't put links there.
I'm going to add it to our Amazon shop right now. So he's telling you to do this, but I'm doing it for you. So just go to
well,
Amazon.
I don't know for sure that the links are there is the problem. So
I will put it in the Amazon shop. So amazon.com/shops/ is it The Wood Whisperer? I can't remember.
Wood Whisperer, I think.
Amazon.
So let me just thank some of the people on Patreon. Charlie Parco, Nick Wagner, Rafael Molina, Brian Grubal, Luis Diaz, and now I think I'm going back into people who I've already said before. Stash Ravens, Ian Hepburn, Philip, Jake Bessler, Jason Tetchler, Kevin Lyman. So if I didn't mention your name, I apologize. I do like to mention the people who helped us out on Patreon. Let's get to it.
It says it's currently unavailable, and it's only the gray. Didn't you have, is it multiple, or is it just one?
I had 3 different versions of it. We'll figure it out later.
Okay.
Let's not figure it out now.
I'll figure it out, JB.
Like, Nicole likes to work on this stuff live, like while everybody's watching. Okay, so pre-selected questions here. David Price wrote in, he says, what's your process when figuring out joinery? When to use dovetails, tenons, box joints, etc.? I know they're all almost identical in strength. Is it merely aesthetics, or do you have a specific joinery for use for specific tests, like a corner of a table or a box? This is a really challenging thing. Well, what's challenging about it is putting it in a format that's understandable and makes a whole lot of sense for people. So when I'm deciding on joinery, the reality is most joints and most joinery types will work, right? A lot of times it's figuring out what absolutely will not work or what absolutely doesn't make sense for a particular situation. If you approach it from which one is, which one of these should I use, it's a little bit trickier. Think about the ones that absolutely make no sense and then just pick one of the other ones, right? Now there's going to be exceptions, and we would need very specific use cases to really nail this down in a meaningful way. But what I'm trying to express is that sometimes it's not as big of a deal as we think. Now, if you're going for a table and you need an apron joining to a leg or some kind of a rail joining to a leg, well, obviously that's a great use case for mortise and tenon. But in some cases, you may have a situation where a sliding dovetail makes sense, right? But it's still going to be strong, it's just not going to penetrate as deep. But if you really need strength, that mortise and tenon is going to be the way to go. If you're doing a box or a drawer, my gosh, there's like hundreds of different ways that you could put that together. And because each joint is strong enough, maybe one is a little stronger than the next one, but who cares? You're probably not ever going to experience that level of pressure on those joints. So it doesn't matter as much as we might think it does. So a lot of times it does come down to aesthetics.
You want me to get her out of here?
Yes. The thing is, I'm a very active and involved parent most times. She's now turning on tools, so you're going to have to go. And it's really, really difficult for me to sit here and ignore my child as she's running through my shop. So it's an incredible distraction. You got the chat room open here, Nicole?
Yes.
Okay. Let me get the chat up.
It's already up.
Oh, you're going to get her on the iPad? Yeah. Well, if she sits there, then we'll be fine. I'm going to move to David Hunter's question. David says, hi, folks. I have a dilemma. I could buy a spiral cutter joiner, finally, or upgrade my 24-inch, and he wants to upgrade his 24-inch benchtop classic knife jointer, or I could buy a 14-inch bandsaw. My question, which came first for you, the bandsaw or the jointer? What did you lament about not buying the other thing first? Okay, so this is one of those classic woodworkers' dilemmas. You've got a budget, you got a few bucks, which one do you buy first? The thing is, I always recommend buy the tool that satisfies a function that you don't currently have before you upgrade something else. So he already has a jointer. It just happens to be a smaller straight knife jointer. He wants to upgrade to a spiral. In terms of what he can do in the shop, upgrading to that spiral isn't going to change anything. He might be able to do some figured woods a little bit easier. It's a creature comfort thing at that point. Maybe he'll be able to do longer boards if he gets a longer bed. But ultimately, the functionality comes from buying a tool that does something that none of your other tools do. So I'm going to assume that he doesn't have a bandsaw, and a bandsaw is going to open up lots of doors for him. So in my opinion, you want to go for the tool that does something new. So for his case, I would say the bandsaw, and then the upgrade is something that you do later on when you have all of the other functions satisfied. I muted you just so you don't make any noise. Okay. So, for me, as far as regretting things, I can't really recall anything that I regret kind of getting out of order. I was lucky and had a friend when I was in Southern California who he ran into hard times, had a bunch of Powermatic tools for sale. You remember that? And everybody chipped in, and we loaded up a trailer and brought a 6-inch Powermatic jointer home and a 20-inch planer.
Did you get a table saw?
Yeah, that's when I got the PM66.
Yeah.
So I got a really nice complement of Powermatic tools early on in my woodworking career. I basically jumped from Craftsman to Powermatic. Yeah. So that was a good time for me.
But you kind of waited, and it was like...
They were used.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody chipped in, and it was, you know, barely used, really, is what it came down to. Again, it was a friend who ran into hard times, so we were, you know, able to help each other out in that case. Okay, my last question I have, if you want to throw in some questions at some point, that's fine.
Well, why don't you
want to grab one?
Yeah. One from Robert McDonald. Can you make an S4S on a jointer? People have said no, you need a plane or two. I disagree. I don't know.
Who does he disagree with?
I don't know. People.
Can you make S4S on a jointer? People have said no, you need a plane or two. I disagree. Well, Robert McDonald, if you disagree with the people who say that you need a plane or two, then you are incorrect.
So you're going to say you need a plane or two?
You do need a planer. Here's the thing. You can do it without a planer, but you're going to need probably some hand tools. Or you're going to need wood that starts off pretty square to begin with. If you are working with like a square block, like maybe a leg that's equal thickness and dimension, yeah, you could probably make that 4 square on the jointer. But if you're talking about a standard board, I just happen to have a board here, Nicole.
It just so happened. It's like we're in a shop.
It is. And a board like this, for instance, there's actually no way that you can guarantee that everything is going to be perfectly square and coplanar. So when you run it over the jointer, let's take it step by step. First face is this one here. We're going to run that over. It's going to give us a nice flat face. Okay. Now the jointer has a fence that's at 90 degrees. So we're going to take that jointed face, we're going to put that on the fence and run that. So now we not only have a straight edge, we have a 90-degree relationship between that face and that next edge. So you're probably saying, well, I could just go to the other face and do that one. Okay, so now we have a flat face, and then we have another edge here, and we'll do that one. So you have created 2 different flat surfaces with a adjacent 90-degree edge. What you haven't done is created a coplanar. It's not coplanar, parallel planes is what they are technically, because you may actually induce some kind of a taper here. You may create a wedge shape. There's no guarantee that all of these are in unison with each other. So what a planar does is it takes that same face that you jointed, you run it through, now you're going to get a flat face on the opposing side, and you're also going to get a parallel plane. All right, so then when you joint both sides, you know, you should be able to get something that's closer to S4S. But you're not going to get there with a jointer. Unless you have some magic trick that I'm not aware of, it's pretty much impossible unless you start with a piece that's already pretty darn close to parallel planes and square. You're sort of reusing what's already there in that case. But if you have a rough board and you use a jointer to try and get S4S, it's not going to happen. Okay.
I got a super chat from Joseph.
A super chat? Oh, so Joseph, our good buddy?
Happy Friday. Thanks again for the Lee Nielsen discounts. Hashtag guild member benefits.
Dude, let me tell you about these Lee Nielsen discounts. People are stoked about this because this stuff is expensive. I mean, my goodness. I'm going to show you a demo later using the Lee Nielsen block plane. This thing is a work of art, work of functional art, and it's not cheap. So what do we get as guild students? We get 10% off.
Yep.
And by the way, I placed an order with them recently, and I wasn't sure if I was eligible. I'm like, I'm still learning. I'm a student. Give me my discount. And they did. I got my discount. It was great. So guild benefits, my friend.
It pays for itself, right?
It really does. Okay, Justin Hill wrote in. He says, what's your go-to method and tool for adding a chamfer to through tenons or fingers of box joints like you see in the green and green style? I'm going to show you. Let's do a little demo. Quick and easy demos. That's what I'm all about. That's my nickname in college. Quick and easy.
Quick and easy.
Demo.
Thick and, what was it? Thick and quick?
Thick and creamy?
Oh, God.
Oh, the Titebond. Titebond quick and thick is what you're talking about. Okay. By the way, before I forget, tell Titebond about that glue bottle.
Oh, yeah.
Is because I was in someone else's shop.
Oh, that's right.
And that they don't need to send me a current glue bottle because I already have them. All right, so what we're talking about, and this is kind of an exaggerated version of a big old chamfer on the end of a workpiece here. So how do I add this chamfer? Now, I didn't want to get noisy, and the router table's all the way over there, but I usually use a router first. The reason I do this is because the router is going to give me a nice consistent surface. It's going to establish a model that I can kind of use from this point to finish it off. Now, why don't I go all the way? well, sometimes on the router you can get that tear out, right? So if you take this all the way to the edge, you could pop that piece off. And especially if we're dealing with even smaller pieces and we're talking about finger joints and things like that, you may not be able to get to all the different edges that you need to get to. So the reason I do this is I get as much as I can using the router as possible. And anything else, I'm going to find some other way to do it. And now what I'm going to show you are the other ways. So first of all, a chisel. If you're handy with a chisel, you can actually just reference from the surface that's already here and just kind of continue to push through. Now in this case, we probably don't want to go this way, right? Because we're going to get tear out. So you would want to go in this way. Now normally, I would not be chiseling with my body in the path of the chisel, but these are the things that I do for you guys. All right, so I'm just going to use light paring strokes and just kind of ease that material away. And you see how easy that is to do? And then you can kind of just follow the path here. And I got good sharp chisels, and this is cherry, so it shouldn't be too bad. Now that is nearly perfect, but the key is the fact that I was able to follow a pattern that's already in place. And from that point, all I would need to do is come back with a little bit of sandpaper. I like to have sandpaper on a piece of wood. Makes it nice and rigid. And I follow, usually eyeball. Look, see, here's my eyeball. All right, I eyeball like this, and I find the 45-degree angle. And I could just take a few strokes to sand that out. All right, so now that's pretty perfect. All right, now the ends are another case where it's just kind of difficult to get those, especially on the router, because you're running it like this. All right, so I typically get as much as I can, which is usually just kind of the middle area, and then I'll do the same thing. I'll come back with a sanding implement, with a chisel, or even with a block plane, just to kind of start to work it a little bit, get it down pretty close, and then like that. Now on the ends, you do have to be careful. You don't want to create a taper here, so you will have to pay attention to where you're putting your pressure so you can even out that chamfer. All right, I'm not going to get it all the way, but that's pretty close. So that's it if you're going to use the router as a starting point. You certainly don't have to. You can always just do this 100% by hand and do something like this. All right, so if you get a block plane, and if you're pretty good at holding a 45-degree angle, there's no reason you can't go across like so. Now again, nice sharp tool. See, it's cutting no problem through this cherry, but you still have to be careful at the very end, right? Watch what happens if I keep going. Right, you see we start to tear that up. That's not a good thing. So what you eventually want to do, get about 3/4 across that chamfer, and you're going to want to start coming in from the other direction. Now I've kind of mangled it pretty good, which is not a good thing, but that was just for demonstration purposes. Yeah. All right, we're getting pretty close, but you get the idea. As long as you are able to hold the plane at a fairly fixed position, eventually you'll start taking full width shavings across that whole chamfer. And then, same thing, I'll come back with a rigid sanding implement of some sort. Ooh.
Ooh, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that.
I'll push instead of pull, how about that? And you can get a surface that's nearly machined looking, right? And you may wind up having something slightly off from 45, but what I find is whatever angle I tend to hold, it's almost habitual, so that when I go back and do this side and add my chamfer on this edge, I'm probably going to do the same angle, right? So even if it's not a perfect 45, who cares? It'll be consistent all the way across. And if you do need to change it, you can change your angle of approach and very easily adjust the chamfer to have either more, or I should say, more angle or less of an angle. I guess it depends on your perspective. And then for the ends, it's something that I find kind of difficult to do with a plane on the edge like that. You can do it, but it's a little tricky. This is something where I think the chisel just happens to excel. As I'm doing this, I'm kind of going in an upward direction. I'm going with the grain. I'm not coming down like that, because that would tear out again. All right. So I get that as close as I feel like I need to, so that it matches what I've done on the other chamfers. And then again, with that hard sanding implement, you can kind of get that where it needs to be. And that is one of the few Friday Live demos we'll ever do. And that's chamfers, baby. All right, you want to queue up another question for us?
Thomas Splain. Question about to make a holder for my new sharpening stones. What wood would be best, or is it even make a difference?
He wants to create a holder for his sharpening stones? Mm-hmm. I don't think it matters that much, but if we're talking about, standard sharpening stones, you're probably looking at something that's going to receive water contact, right?
Yeah.
So you could, if you want to, take a cue from anything for like outdoor furniture. You may want to use an outdoor-friendly wood, something that naturally is going to resist rotting and the problems and things that happen with water exposure. At the same time, you may also just slather that thing with some kind of a finish and make it impenetrable to moisture. That's probably what I would do. I would consider something like a holder for water stones to be very sacrificial.
Well, he doesn't say water stones. He just says sharpening stone. But
chances are it's water stones. Yeah, most people are using water stones.
Yeah, he did say water stone.
And I would consider that sacrificial. So I wouldn't put too much effort into it. I would make it pretty basic, knowing that maybe in 5 or 6 years I might be making a new one. But I would make it out of whatever happens to be around, a decent hardwood, and I would coat that sucker in like Epiphanes or something, or just something to make it impenetrable to the water and it'll last a lot longer. But there's a couple ways you could approach it, depending on what you have on hand.
All right, Mark Rayner. Ooh, I want to play some StarCraft.
Oh, Rayner, nice.
Mark, when
yeah, that's my name. Hon.
You say Mark? When tackling a new project, how do you choose the woods? What would you use, traditional species, or what you have available, or what's on sale?
There's a lot of times where it comes down to a different set of factors. It depends on who you are, what you have access to, what your budget is. How about what your worldview is?
Yeah, don't touch that.
Don't turn on that table saw, young lady.
Here.
If you are environmentally conscious, right, and you don't want to use certain species because they could be, depleting them could be damaging to the environment. So you may want to avoid certain exotics, right? But a lot of people are more into making the best looking furniture they could possibly make, so they don't care about that environmental impact. It's just a personal thing and where you stand on that. So that may be a factor. Certainly using local domestic species is always a good thing. It's stuff that's renewable, it's accessible, and it's probably a good price. So I do let that factor in, which is why most of my projects these days, as much as I kind of have a reputation as the Bubinga guy, most of my projects these days are cherry and walnut. They're easy to work, they're available. I wouldn't say they're cheap, but they're not as expensive as a lot of the exotics out there. And I think cherry and walnut I feel like they never go out of style. Sometimes if you push a little too far with an exotic, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. So, but there's just a lot of different things in that decision matrix about which species you use for a project. Don't forget that the function really means a lot. So we just talked about the sharpening stone holder. Well, there's a functional reason why you might pick one species over another because of water exposure. So if you're doing an outdoor project, maybe you're doing a kitchen table or something that needs to be a little bit more of a durable surface, you might go with a more harder species.
Michael Nudegate.
Sure.
Yeah.
Nudegate.
Would you recommend PVC or metal piping for dust collection?
Either one will work. I like metal, personally. I feel like metal is easier for me to work with. Depending on the type of metal ducting, it just seems like it's easier. It's more fun. It's lighter. So if you're standing up on a 8-foot ladder or maybe higher, you're going to be a lot happier if you have metal ductwork than PVC. PVC is going to be kind of a bear to install. But I just enjoy the look and the feel and working with metal. And you don't need Nordfab. There's different types of spiral ductwork that's more cost efficient. There's
Didn't you get
budget.
Most of your original stuff from like Home Depot?
initially. Home Depot only sells up to a certain gauge for like HVAC purposes, and there are certain gauges that will crush under the pressure of a good cyclone, you know, a good dust collector. So you can only go so far, but you could step it up. I know like Penn State Industries was a company that I used to order tons of ductwork from because they had, just like Home Depot has, that snap lock material, but it was a thicker gauge. So it was actually good enough for dust collection, was reasonably priced, and it ships flat, which is kind of cool. So then if it ships flat, cutting it, you just need like tin snips or something to cut across that flat surface and then fold it together, and now you got your pipe. So for me, I like metal, but PVC works just fine. A lot of people use it. You'll find a lot of people are going to tell you that the PVC is a explosion hazard. I see no evidence of that, so I wouldn't worry about it. There's a whole, it's basically one of those woodworking wives' tales, if you will, about exploding PVC.
Didn't they do a Mythbusters on that too?
There was a Mythbusters on that. For me, more so than the TV show, is asking around at how many people have you ever heard? I mean, let's look at hazards, right? Shop fires from oily rags. How many of you have heard a story or know someone who's had that happen? A lot. There's a lot of people who've had that happen. This is just empirical evidence talking here. But with PVC, how many people with a wood shop that have PVC pipe have experienced an explosion? Now they might get static sparks and you touch it, you might get a little bit of a shock, but how many have actually had an explosion or fire? I don't know of any. So not to say that that's absolute, factual evidence, but it's empirical evidence and it's good enough for me.
Co-Cubs fan 1060 says a new guild project is starting in a week or so, at least scheduled to. Are you going to start the build next week, or are there going to be a couple weeks coming up with the design?
Well,
you missed the announcement.
Yeah, if you go back to the sales page, the date has changed, and I changed it last week, and also put out an announcement about it because schedule crap. I'm not going to go into it now, but I had to postpone it. So the new start date is it's basically a 1-month postponement. If I can start earlier, I will, but I still have to get the design together. So
yeah, we have some ideas.
Not there yet.
Yeah. B. Walker, how do you count for bandsaw drift? Mine is not cutting as true as I expected. Thank you.
Bandsaw drift is one of those things that can, in most cases, be eliminated with setup. Go to our website and look for the bandsaw setup video we did, not even a year ago, with Alex Snodgrass, and that will set you straight. And that hopefully will get your bandsaw cutting true, and you won't have to adjust for the drift. You just adjust your fence square to the table. If there is still a bit of a problem, you can do one of those things where you take a jointed edge and draw a line a couple of inches in from that edge and start cutting. Make it a nice long piece. And as you start cutting, lock in, you'll start to see like you have to either skew one way or the other. Hold that in place and then bring your fence over and adjust it to whatever that angle is. Because there still might be a little bit of drift even after you do the Snodgrass setup, but most times the Snodgrass setup will completely eliminate drift.
Jeannie wants to know if you don't have the apron anymore. Are there small sizes for the aprons? And I thought there were.
Not now.
Not now? Okay.
So we are toying with smaller sizes. I know we have a couple of prototypes of children's sizes. I know that's not what Jeannie wants. You could try it, Jeannie. It might be fun to wear that around, but it might only cover your upper body. So we will look into it if there's enough demand. A lot of times the stuff, we have to have it made up ahead of time. So maybe what we can do is talk to Michael about making a set of pre-orders. And women? If we have the pre-orders, for women and Cremonas, and small enough size that it'll accommodate the smaller frames.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Matt Powers, I'm in the process of making a Caro Walnut Live Edge coffee table and I haven't decided on a finish yet. Would it be better to go with a hard finish like poly or go with an oil wax blend like Osmos?
I don't know. I mean, here's the thing with these finishes. This has raised a lot of questions by talking about Osmo recently, and I think it's really important to understand what that stuff is. And asking me what's better to use, I can't tell you that because I don't know what you're going to do and what your future is for that table, how much maintenance you want to do. Hard wax oil finish is oil and wax. So all you're really having to, that's allowing protection to occur is whatever oil soaks into the surface and then cures, and then the wax layer. And usually you're applying 2, no more than 3 coats of Osmo. So it's not really a thick layer film finish. Polyurethane is the opposite. It's a very thick layer of finish that's going to offer tons of protection, but it's not that repairable. You know, the Osmo is pretty easy to repair if you have a problem. So deciding which way to go is a very personal choice. Do you want something that's more protective at the outset that isn't likely to show wear immediately, but when you do have to repair it is like kind of a big ordeal? Or do you want something that's easier to repair? And thank goodness it's easier to repair because you're likely to have to repair it sooner. There is no right answer. I'm going to get more into this hard wax because the hard wax oil thing is a bit of a trend right now. And and I'm kind of falling into it myself because I like the idea of low VOC hard wax oil type finishes. Part of the problem with Osmo is it's not low VOC. So that's where, as much as I like the finish it produces, at least initially, I'm having trouble with my long-term, I don't know where it's going to be long-term. And part of the reason I want to use a hard wax oil is to get away from VOCs. I want a low to no VOC finish if I can. So using Osmo doesn't get me there. And I may as well be using, a regular polyurethane mix or Armor Seal for the amount of, the VOC stands for volatile organic compounds. So for the amount of the stuff that's in there.
I always wondered what that stood for.
Yeah, so it's all the nasty stuff. So the bigger the number, the nastier it is, and it still has plenty in there, which is a little bothersome to me. If I'm gonna sacrifice protection by going with an oil wax blend in the first place, I'd rather be on the tried and true side of things, the brand Tried and True, which is, they have polymerized oil and wax, and then you've got Rubio Monocoat, which is a 2-part finish, but it's also hard wax oil that's no VOC. All right, one more question. I think we're good.
Oh, okay. What time is it?
We're running long. I got to record Wood Talk.
I was going to, so let's see. The Swedish Hand, when upgrading from a 6-inch joiner.
Bernie. The hand.
I know, that's what I was thinking too.
Bernie. All right.
You're so
Swedish.
Is it a waste to go on an 8-inch or should I just go 12-inch? I have an eye on a 10-inch planer joiner combo, but the joiner bed is short. Seems like I would want a longer bed.
Yeah, longer beds are good. I think I would value a longer bed over a wider bed initially. So my first jointer was the Powermatic 6-inch jointer. I couldn't afford the 8-inch, that wasn't even on the menu. But the Powermatic versus other brands, at that time, Powermatic had the longest bed. So being able to take 4-foot, 6-foot, 8-foot boards and joint them effectively was more valuable to me than being able to joint something that's as much as 8 inches wide. So go back, what was the actual meat of his question?
He has an eye on a 10-inch jointer.
So he's upgrading from 6-inch. Is it a waste to go to 8 or should I go to 12? Well, I am living happily with an 8. I mean, if I could upgrade to a 12, I'd love to, but here's the thing with jointers. The price jump is insane, right? This isn't like a small upgrade choice. It's like almost buying a second jointer in some cases. Jumping from 6 to 8 is a pretty big jump, but jumping from 8 to 12 most times is a very big jump in cost. So if you can afford the 12-inch, get it. I don't think you're going to regret it. But if you get an 8-inch because of the budget, I've been using an 8-inch jointer for years now. And while I'd like to have the creature comforts of a 12-inch, I'm surviving just fine with an 8-inch jointer.
Justin Hill just did a super chat and said thank you for the demonstration.
Oh, nice. You're welcome, Justin.
You're very
welcome. He was one of our questions here. Okay. So I think we're going to wrap it up.
Are you recording Wood Talk today or is this an off week?
No, we're recording today. That's why I keep saying I have to stop to do Wood Talk. We're actually doing Wood Talk in about 15 minutes.
And they want to know if Wood Talk is live.
We're going to go live. We are not going with video, though. The video is what screws me up all the time. So I'm going to try live, just audio with a nice picture that I think you guys will like.
Yeah, you already scheduled the scream?
I scheduled, well, it's going to be a lot like a scream. 1 hour scream with 2 other people. That's how most people describe Wood Talk. It's like listening to a 1 hour scream. So yeah, that's going to happen in a few minutes. Yay. Anything else that we got to do?
Let me just double check to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Okay, I'm going to drink some Wawa.
I was away from this this computer for a few seconds. Hopefully my child is fine with my other child.
I'm sure they're okay. Here, I'll look at the camera and check.
Well, the problem is you moved that camera, so I can't.
Oh.
She was in the living room.
Okay.
so you really can't check that.
We have cameras all over the house.
Yeah.
Like a bank in there.
Nope, we're good.
Okay.
We're good.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate you bearing
out.
with us
Yeah.
with the children involved like that.
Juggling.
Try to minimize things.
Juggling the children's.
It's not a parenting show, Nicole. It's a woodworking show.
Could be. We could do that too.
You want to do a parenting show? That'd be great. All right. Well, thank you for watching, everybody. Remember, if you want to help out the show, you could do that at patreon.com/woodwhisperer and get a chance to have your questions pre-selected like we did for those folks.
Yay. Do you want to pick a winner?
Let's pick a winner. So the winner, if you don't know
dinner.
what we're talking about, we pick a winner every show. I typically forget to do that, and we do it afterwards.
Yeah.
But I remembered today. Let's see. I actually liked. I don't remember what those other questions were.
Well, I got it right here. But it's so hard for me to pull because I can never.
You know, I'm going to give it to Justin Hill.
Okay.
Because I just thought that was a really good question. It was easy for me to demo, and I thought there was a lot of value.
And you did a demo.
And I did a little
Very
demo.
good.
So hey,
Justin,
yeah.
I will
Enjoy that, Justin.
I will message you.
You get a free guild project. Okay, peace out. Adios, muchachos.
Bye.
Ooh. Oops, there goes my apron.
It's okay. It's